Well, this season of Lent, we are walking the ancient path of the prophets. The prophets who invite us to turn inward and explore all the things that we carry. Just think about all the things that you have carried just this 1 week. For me, I have carried the joy of celebrating 25 years of marriage. Thank you. To my beloved partner, Chad Mattingly. But I've also carried the loss of my father-in-law. We all carry the heartbreak of how humans have accelerated the pace of global warming. And the good news that the plastic bag bans have reduced litter on our shorelines up to 47%. Wow. We carry the confusion and maybe even anger over our war. And yet we carry with us kind stories like the story about the Little League coach who pressed pause on the game so that one of his players who was fasting during Ramadan could have water and fruit when the sun had set. Etty Hillesum is another one who I think she wrote best what it means to be a human being and carry things. Etty was one who died during the Holocaust. In her journal, she wrote, "Living and dying, sorrow and joy, the blisters on my feet and the jasmine behind the house, the persecution, the unspeakable horrors. It is all as one in me, and I accept it as one mighty whole." This is the same path that Jesus walked as he celebrated love at a wedding feast, as he sat with the suffering of the woman caught in adultery, and who inspires us to forgive each other again and again and again, so that in the end we can forgive the world as it is. Well, today I am excited to share the story of a modern day prophet. Her name is Etty Hillesum, and she grew up in Deventer, a small city in the east of the Netherlands. We only know of Etty because of a diary that she kept, but she only kept the diary for 2 years. She began writing in her diary on March 9th, 1941. When the Germans had occupied the Netherlands for almost a year. And as I tell her story, I want you to pick up on the path that she walked, for it's the path that we have explored over the past 4 weeks, the path of the prophets. Now, the prophets, we know, had a radical message for God's people. Instead of when they met the trials and the consequences of their behavior, instead of pointing outward and blaming others or blaming God, the prophets tell them to begin turning inwards and exploring all the things that they were carrying. Well, even in the midst of evil and fear, confusion and despair, Etty explored her own inner landscape. She writes again and again about how she needs to turn inward to really get to know what's going on within her. In 1941, she wrote, "If you want to teach others how to live, you must first take yourself in hand. You are going to have to go on taking stock of yourself." Now, most often, when things are easy and things are going our way, we do not pause to turn inward and explore the lessons we are learning. And then when things get really tough, we very quickly look outward for who we can blame for our suffering. That's the easy route. Yet the invitation of the prophets and the invitation of suffering is to do what is hard, to do what is courageous, and begin to observe our own inner landscape, all the things that we carry, as well as the role that we have played in the suffering. This is the extraordinary brilliance of what the prophets call God's people, you and I, to do. Well, Etty recognizes the full weight of all that she is carrying. She felt the heaviest of sorrow. She saw the anger and the hatred in the Nazis' eyes, and she felt that same hatred in her heart. As she made space for her deepest sorrow, her tears began to cleanse the eyes of her heart, and she wrote on March 28th, 1942, and we have a slide for this. March 28th, 1942. And you must be able to bear your sorrow. Do not relieve your feelings through hatred. Do not seek to be avenged on all German mothers, for they too sorrow at this very moment for their slain and murderous sons. Give your sorrow all the space and shelter in yourself that is its due. For then you may truly say, life is beautiful and so rich. Only a few months after that journal entry, we read Etty reframe the narrative through her tears. A couple of weeks ago, we talked about using a very simple word to help us understand how to reframe our narrative. It's using the word and. And so listen to how Etty uses the word and to reframe her narrative. And we have a slide for this as well. On July 1st, 1942, she writes, I am in Poland every day on the battlefields, if that's what one can call them. I am with the hungry, with the ill-treated and the dying, and I am also with the jasmine. And with that piece of sky beyond my window, there is room for everything in a single life. She was able to hold everything together as sacred. The suffering of her people, the imprisonment of her family, and her own unique suffering, and to see her one precious life as a meaningful gift so that she could include the suffering and beyond it to celebrate the beauty of God's creation that was all around her. Well, after being able to see a more expansive view and connect her suffering to the suffering of German mothers who have lost their sons, listen to how her heart is transformed so that she moves through her days, connecting to the humanity of her enemy. She begins with the big and takes it into everyday experiences. We have a slide for this one as well. After being yelled at and threatened by a Gestapo agent, she writes, I am not easily frightened, not because I am brave, but because I know that I am dealing with human beings, and that I must try as hard as I can to understand everything that anyone ever does. And that was the real import of this morning, not that a disgruntled young Gestapo officer yelled at me, but the fact that I felt no indignation, rather a real compassion. And would have liked to have asked, did you have a very unhappy childhood? Has your girlfriend let you down? In the midst of suffering, she explores the shared humanity with one who we would call her enemy. She begins by taking the bigger picture of the German mothers and saying, just like I weep for my people who have been killed, so too do the German mothers weep for their sons who have been killed. And then she brings it to very specific examples in her everyday life by saying, just like me, this is a human being. Just like me, this human being is suffering. Just like me, he must have a cause for his suffering. Well, after being a volunteer at the transit camp, where she was able to stay close to her family who was imprisoned there, Etty was then imprisoned herself. She had many opportunities to escape the Netherlands and even to escape imprisonment, and yet she chose to stay with the suffering. She chose to sit with the heartbreak. At the beginning of June 1942, she writes, "And even if we stay alive, we shall carry the wounds with us throughout our lives. And yet I don't think that life is meaningless. And God is not accountable to us for the senseless harm we cause one another." Etty acknowledges that some lessons, some messages, some wounds we will carry throughout our life, and yet we are not defined by them, and they do not define our God. Etty's view of God fits with the expanding view of the prophets. Our prophets recognized our tendency to begin with a picture of a very angry God who is quick to deliver punishments when we fail. But what they discover through maturing in their faith is that suffering is most often because of our collective behavior and not as a result of a punishing God. Etty's view of a loving God who creates all that is beautiful in our world and all that is beautiful in each one of us. Each of us have that beautiful place within us, that innate goodness. And all of that leads her to the heart of engaged compassion. She writes, and we have a slide for this, "Let me perform 1,000 daily tasks with love, but let everyone spring from a greater central core of devotion and love. Then it won't really matter what I do and where I am." On September 7th, 1943, Etty, her parents, and her brother Mishka were put on a transport to Auschwitz. And we have a postcard from that day that she threw out the window of the train as it departed. The postcard reads, "Tell them we left the camp singing." Etty died in Auschwitz 3 months later. Etty's painful, transforming inner journey to God, to love, to peace, leads her inward through introspection and outward to expand the narrative to include both the suffering and the joys of life. And then to the difficult task of recognizing our shared humanity with those who do us harm. Finally, her journey leads her to identify with all those who are suffering, to sit in the heartbreak of shared suffering. And it is in the suffering that she awakens to engaged compassion. She realizes that what matters most is the state of her heart. What she is called to do is to do everything, 1,000 daily tasks with a central core of devotion and love. Without naming it, Etty lived the full journey of forgiveness. And forgiveness is the final message of our prophets. Forgiveness not because of our deserving it, but because of who God is. Remember, Ezekiel tells us that even though we may not acknowledge our sin, even though we may not have asked for forgiveness, that God forgives us because of God's name. God says, I forgive you because that is what my name requires. And Jeremiah tells us that in the new covenant, God will write the law on our softened hearts. Our softened hearts that can sit with the suffering, sit with the heartbreak, and that God forgives us and will remember our sins no more. This radical forgiveness is extended to us so that we can extend the same forgiveness to others. Others who do not deserve it. Others who, like us, may never acknowledge the action that caused harm. Others who, like us, may never ask for forgiveness. It's a clear message that was over 500 years old at the time of Jesus, and yet the disciples still come to Jesus like we do today and ask, Jesus, how often do we have to forgive? And Jesus replies, the truth is that you are invited to this process an infinite number of times. The path of forgiveness will teach you not only to forgive specific people, but to forgive the world for how it is. This is the good news. We are forgiven. And this is the good news that we are to share freely with our neighbor and especially with those who cause us harm. This is what we carry. This is the path we are given to acknowledge all that we carry and the forgiveness that we hold as a gift, to acknowledge all of it with love. To see through tears, to hold it all as sacred, and to forgive. Jesus, how often do we forgive? Again. Jesus, how often do we forgive? Again. Jesus, how often do we forgive? Again. And so today I want to invite you into a moment of reflection. And these questions are up on the slides. Can you name one person who has caused harm and ask, just like me, what might they be carrying? Or maybe this question resonates with you more. What would it look like this week to do one ordinary task from a central core of love? Let us take a moment for reflection, and we'll come together and pray our prayer for the things that we carry.